This is Anthony Pascal.
And this is Laurie Elster, and this is the All Access Star Trek podcast. Today we're going to be reviewing Star Trek Lower Decks, Season 4, Episode 4, Something Borrowed, Something Green. But first, we're going to cover the news, starting with New York Comic Con. They finally announced that there is going to be a Star Trek Universe panel, but no celebrities.
I was surprised because with San Diego Comic Con, they waited to the last minute, I guess because they were kind of not sure what to do. They announced this a month in advance. So I guess they've just thrown in the towel and just said, we're not going to have celebrities, but we're going to do a panel anyway. They've done big stuff in New York. The Discovery had the big trailer, and last year, they've had big panels there. I was really hoping New York Comic Con would happen after the strike. It's possible the WGA strike is going to be over by then. The talks have restarted.
Yep.
If that happened, they'd probably scramble to get Alex and Michelle there. But so they're going to do kind of what they did in San Diego. They're going to show an episode in advance. In this case, an episode of Lower Decks. It won't be as cool as the crossover.
No, it won't be like a much anticipated specific one that everyone's been talking about for a year or longer.
It will be, it'll be the episode that would have aired the next week. I don't know if they're going to also put it on Paramount Plus.
They might do that like they did it before, just because people talk about, I assume, spoiler issues and whatever.
Right. So that'll be episode 8, because this happens on October 14th. What's new with this one is they are promising, quote, reveals and surprises. Now, in Comic-Con, it was Scott Mantz. He shows up on stage. He showed some family photos. He
did?
Yes. Well, no, he showed a picture of himself when he was a kid, with Star Trek.
In a Star Trek uniform or something, right?
Yeah. And they rolled in the episode and that was it. There was no one on stage. There was no real announcements, except for the early release. But this time, I think, maybe they're going to do more. I'm expecting they're going to do something for Discovery, maybe.
At least tell us the premiere date of the final season.
The problem with Discovery is they 100% want the cast and crew out there promoting it. My bet is they'll set a date, but a date that they're willing to move if the strikes aren't over.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely.
They're going to treat the final season like a big deal. They're not, they're not quietly walking away from the show.
No.
So they may do an in-person premiere event like they've done before. They'll certainly want to get those people out on the talk shows.
Right.
They literally released a trailer for this at last New York Comic Con. This, the show's done. It's ready to go.
Yeah.
So they're just kind of sitting around waiting to release it at this point. But the other problem is, as soon as this show comes out, it kind of begins the drought.
Right.
While some work is happening on Lower Deck Season 5, no voice work is happening yet.
And they wouldn't be running that right after Discovery anyway.
Right, but it's questionable whether that could even come in the summer. It might be the fall. Prodigy is kind of ready to go if they get a deal, so that would be. But on Paramount Plus itself, they've got nothing for Star Trek after this. So they're going to want to get as much out of it as they possibly can. Okay, so that's Comic-Con.
Which I'm hopefully going to go to. Of course, last year was the big Picard panel that I was not at because I was on a family vacation. So,
to be honest, you're going to be there, but you probably won't be able to talk to anybody because there'll be no one to talk to.
There'll be no one to, right, unless I want to talk to some nice PR people or the person setting up the projector. Just kidding.
Scott Mantz, maybe.
He won't be there because it's in New York.
But yeah, they'll have someone like that. Okay, little Paramount Plus, expanding globally. They announced that in December they're going to Japan, which is their second Asian launch after South Korea last summer, I think. They're doing a partnership again. This time it's with two companies, one called JCOM, one called Wow Wow. That is the name.
Sorry, had a little laugh at Wow Wow. They said they'll have Strange New Worlds available when they launch, but no other details yet about what other shows.
It could be all the other shows, or no, I've reached out to them. They said they'll get back to me, so we'll know more on that later. They put out a video, and it's got a lot of Tom Cruise in it, a lot of SpongeBob, a lot of Transformers, no Star Trek. So Star Trek's not huge in Japan. Let's just
I was
face
just
it.
going to say not big in Japan, unlike so many other things.
But what's funny is they also announced a partnership with a company called Swisscom, which is a mobile provider and broadband provider in Switzerland. Now, Paramount Plus is already available in Switzerland, so this is kind of one of those deals where they're also working with kind of like how you get Paramount Plus through Walmart here in the USA, or you can, in the UK, you can get it through Orange, which is a phone provider. Anyway, they are really leaning into the whole Star Trek of it. They produced this video announcing it, and the video's like all Star Trek. They shot a promotion.
They filmed stuff but you see like the shirt with the badge on it, but you don't see a face because you know that it's not like a famous Star Trek act. It's not someone who's in the show. There's
like a Swiss flugelhorn, I think that's what they're called, but it's doing the Star Trek theme. I mean, so they leaned in.
And for a minute, it looks like it's a trombone. There's a moment, I think, where they're trying to make you get that Riker trombone feel.
So that was kind of fun because, as we know, Star Trek is big in countries where people speak English, and Germany, and I guess Switzerland too, because parts of Switzerland are German speaking, of course. So good on the Swisscom. That was kind of cool.
Yeah, it's fun. All right, this is an interesting thing that you just told me about this story about Jonathan Frakes. It's from an interview in Star Trek Explorer. He's talking about Discovery, and you said it's the top story on the site right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of buzz about this on social and on Reddit. Our friends at the Seventh Rule Virtual TrekCon, they did a whole live stream episode on this yesterday. Even though it's kind of, it's one of those seemingly innocuous things said by Frakes, who directed the penultimate episode, first revealed here when you and I talked about him of season 5. But a couple things he said. One is he used the phrase that it's back on track, Discovery.
Yeah.
And he described season 4 as, quote, emo, which is unlike him to kind of take a dig at something.
I think he said heavy emo.
Heavy emo. I mean, and he also implied that there was he used the phrase a mandate. So he's basically saying someone, I think it's coming from Alex, is really, saying, lighten up, guys. The final season. And Alex is a co-showrunner, so he could kind of say to himself, let's lighten up. They didn't know it was the final season at the time. But so this kind of leans more into how the 5th season is a big pivot for the show. Frakes talked about he injected in his episode, even though it was part of the season finale and now series finale, humor, which he likened to Deadpool and First Contact. How you need humor and lightness and tone, but some people, were like, what does he mean? Back on track, when was it on track? How did it get off track?
Right. Like the people who've always loved it or like it was always on track. The people who've always hated it say it was never on track. So I assume that's what some of the buzz is about, because it is the most polarizing show.
Well, I mean, at the official Star Trek Reddit, our Star Trek, this was the top story, as many TrekMovie.com. So thank you, Redditors, for posting our stories. They had to shut down the conversation because it got so out of hand.
Wow.
But it's still active on like 4 other subreddits.
It's so funny. Like Discovery makes people so mad, but the people who love it just love it so much. So it does create some interesting and usually unpleasant conversations.
Yeah, when you look at our Facebook, typical article, a couple dozen, and then a Discovery thing, and it's like 200-300 comments.
Well, people love to hate it too. Like it is an interesting thing that people, if they hate it, they want everyone to know how much they hate it and why they hate it, which is it is bizarre that it is, and I don't use this word often, very triggering for people.
Oh, it is. There is no doubt the show is triggering. I believe Sonequa is triggering for a lot of people.
Oh, for sure. Before they knew anything about her, as soon as they saw her. It's so, like it's, like a show, don't like a show. It seems so simple, right? Watch a show you like, don't watch a show you don't like. But people just, it somehow just gets to them. But
I respect Jonathan Frakes, and reading between the lines, I'm looking forward. I like so much. I love the characters. I love the actors. I do agree with a lot of the criticisms of the show, how it does, the
pacing is a problem.
Pacing and, of course, reducing to 10 helped. Every season they make important fixes. Season 2, they kind of redid the show. And they moved it into the future in season 3, and so it'll be interesting to see this kind of new discovery. I'm looking at bare minimum, I'm looking to see what they do, because it's interesting just, observing how you take a 4-year-old show and you try to reinvent it for a 5th season.
Right.
But I'm also hoping that this, Indiana Jones vibe, which Frakes also talked about, because it's this big mystery. It's a galactic quest to find some thing of power or whatever.
As long as they go to interesting places, that's all I ask. Because if it's just chasing and then I beat you to it, no, I did. We'll see. But I want them to go to interesting places. I love the characters. I'm not looking for more super fast action stuff. That's not my thing, but I don't object to it.
The clip they released at Comic-Con, which is the first 5 minutes of the season, is just all explosions and action and tons of special effects. But Wilson Cruz, a year ago at Comic-Con, New York Comic-Con, said they're going to a bunch of new places that they've never been before. So this, so they are, from what we know. So we'll have much more to say about Discovery in the months between Lower Decks and Discovery as we wait for Discovery.
I'm looking forward to it, though. I am.
In the same magazine, Star Trek Explorer, this latest issue is actually pretty good. This one's got a ton of interviews in it. There's actually more cool stuff from the Frakes interview. He talks about the Legacy show and how he sees the Legacy show. Ed Speleers has his own interview talking about that as well. He's very enthusiastic, and he talks about the post-credit scene. And what kind of takes me back is he talks about how Terry outlined it to him. It just shows you how this was not some kind of master plan where they were setting up the new show. It was kind of done on the fly kind of stuff,
Yeah, it sounds like they were like, okay, we've got them here. I love the taking the moment. Like, let's just shoot something. Let's do it. I got an idea. And then kind of pulling it together. Like they did it at the end of the shoot, right?
Yeah.
And the idea that it would like tee up what could be next, but they didn't know that. They were just kind of,
But they were talking about it and thinking about it, but there was no, because again, they kind of let Terry do what the hell he wanted. Alex was busy working on the Man Who Fell to Earth. He kind of just said, go ahead, Terry, do whatever the hell you want. And he did. And Akiva, who was running the show in the second season, also just was very supportive and said, go for it. So yeah, people walked away with the impression that this was all some master plan and, all some part of corporate synergy where they were setting up a new show. And it was just, it was just some actors and the showrunner just saying, hey, let's just give this a shot. What the hell?
Well, people are used to their Marvel credit scenes, which of course are very carefully planned and put together.
Ed very much wants to keep on doing this. He talks about he really hopes to work with de Lancie again. Of course, de Lancie would do it. He'd be happy to do it.
I think everybody would do it.
Frakes is like so ready to do it. The interesting thing that Frakes said is he'd like to see Riker as a captain on his own ship or as the admiral who does the kind of Charlie's Angels thing, which I think is the more likely scenario than to have him be captain, off on his own ship. Although, maybe they give him a ship that he could, roll out every once in a while as the admiral. That's it for Picard, except a reminder that we're going to have more Picard stuff coming because there's the big Picard box coming.
Ooh.
Crazy, huge Picard box coming in October. So, but the new Picard Blu-rays and stuff are out now, and people are talking about how great those are. A lot of good.
Everybody's talking about it. Everybody seems thrilled.
Good audio commentaries. They talk a lot about the Legacy show and the audio commentaries.
Cool.
Frakes is there, Terry's there, others people are there.
Speaking of DVDs, Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2 is coming to DVD, Blu-ray, and 4K UHD in December. It's already out there for pre-order. We have a list on the site of the special features and some photos. It's got alternate takes like the Klingon song in Subspace Rhapsody, which we know there was a Klingon opera version of that. And obviously there's no commentary.
Yeah, so there was time to do the commentaries for Picard, but not for this.
Right.
There's 5 flavors of this. There's good old-fashioned DVD, which, believe it or not, is still popular. And then there's 4 different Blu-ray releases. There's regular Blu-ray and 4K UHD Blu-ray, which is pretty cool. Then there's Steelbook versions. And if you don't know what a Steelbook is, it's basically the same product in a steel case. These are limited edition. They're a little bit more money. This time they also come with a Subspace Rhapsody poster, and the 4K UHD one also comes with these magnets so you could switch, because again, the case is steel. So you could switch the cover art on your Steelbook to each character.
I need a Subspace Rhapsody poster. I'm still listening to it every single day.
Well, we'll see what we can do to get you one, because they sold out or not sold out. They handed them out at Comic-Con, which shut down the floor at Comic-Con. It was a total disaster.
Some of us are still singing and dancing. I get it.
What else? It's funny. We talk. Jonathan Frakes is all over Star Trek, constantly directing the new shows, and so apparently another prolific director who got their start on Star Trek, Roxann Dawson, was offered the chance to direct for Star Trek as well, but she turned it down. But she, in the last few years, has been directing for the Apple TV show Foundation, which is sci-fi. And so we have a really good article written up by Aaron Bossig, who's one of our contributors, who's writing more for our site now, and he found all these great interview clips of her talking about her directing history and why she turned down the thing. She had nice things to say about new Star Trek.
Aaron did a great job, actually, like telling a thorough story instead of just focusing on one thing that she said. But yeah, she said she always was looking to branch out and do different things, try new things. So she was moving away from sci-fi. And then Foundation came along, but they told her this is not Star Trek. They were very clear that it was different. And so she took it because she always wants to do something that stretches her creatively. I find her to be such an interesting person. She was just on the Delta Flyers a couple of weeks ago, just doing an interview not about Star Trek for obvious reasons, just talking about her background in the theater and some stuff about directing. And I find her fascinating, and she's worked really hard. If you look at her credits, they'll blow your mind.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of prestige drama she's directed, and she directed her own film recently, an indie movie. She's done 4 episodes of Foundation, 2 in each season. I just finished season 2. I was a huge reader of the books, but I love the show, even though talk about changing things from the source material. But you have to, because these are 80-year-old books, So yeah. I love the show. What's funny is Discovery was described as Game of Thrones in space. This is Game of Thrones in space. Discovery never really got that feeling to me, and nor does it have to. It is its own thing, but this show really has that kind of epic space opera feel, and I highly recommend it.
Yeah, I need to watch it. I read the books as a kid, but I was a kid a really long time ago.
It's almost better to just kind of forget the books.
I mean, I have vague memories and I remember enjoying it, but I think I'll check it out.
Anyway, moving on. This is a little merch story, but I liked it. There's a company called Vice Prints, UK company. This week, they just announced they're doing a whole series of Star Trek posters and fine art prints. And what they're doing is they're starting with their own design for a Star Trek The Motion Picture. It's kind of a classic, but a new twist. But they're also going to remaster the Bob Peak posters. But there's some new stuff. They're doing some TNG posters, and these are classy, I guess. They look nice from what I've seen. But not everyone agrees, because they're doing some of their own things. But
it's interesting, because I would think I would want movie posters because I would always want to collect the movie poster that came out for something, the famous movie poster, some weird variation, whatever. But this is a trend called alternative poster art, where they create new art for something, and it's a different idea.
Although in a lot of cases, these are things that you can almost imagine, like one of the versions is kind of a Japanese style poster. You could almost imagine that this came from the 70s. Sometimes, like there was that whole series of TOS posters that were put out by Ortiz. I forget his name.
Yes.
Yeah, those were great, but those were modern and different and fun. And, that's not what this is. These are trying to look like classic movie posters, but in different styles. So Anyway, it's a new licensee. I'm always excited when there's a new licensee. And by the time you listen to this podcast, the first 2 posters, limited editions, launch on Thursday. So they may be sold out by Friday.
So too late. Sorry.
But keep an eye on them for more stuff.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think before we get to Lower Decks, we should talk about the new very short Treks episode that came out called Worst Contact. Talk about polarizing.
Yeah.
I have the thing about, before we get into the specifics, a lot of people don't like these in general, but it's sort of, even though I haven't liked them, to be honest, I sort of like that there are some people out there enjoying them. I keep seeing comments from people going, actually, I thought that was really funny. Yeah, it was good. A good kick in the pants, whatever.
I think it all comes down to how you approach them. Like, if you're thinking that this is part of Star Trek, even something like short treks, I still think naming them short treks, very short treks, was a mistake, because it makes you think of short treks, which were trying to be part of the Star Trek canon, just shorts. These are wacky, kooky, zany. They're parodies, they're not supposed to be real, but they have the real characters. I kind of liked this one, but again, it's one joke that's gross and it takes too long. But so zooming out, the idea is it's a twist on Next Gen. So this time you got Gates McFadden and Jonathan Frakes, and they're doing a first contact, but it just goes really bad, which is why it's called Worst Contact. I guess, one of the things about this, even though it's not canon, is they make stupid mistakes that I'm surprised, because Van Sitters was involved. Beverly calls Riker Bill, and he describes himself as the commanding officer of the Enterprise. I mean, it's like, what happens is when you're watching it as a Star Trek fan, you go, wait, that's not right. For super fans, especially like us, I think that causes a moment where you could have just, is so easy to fix. You just literally change one word or one letter, and you zoom past that, because there's other issues to deal with. They shouldn't get bogged down into just dumb mistakes like that.
So the question is it a mistake? So there are 2 ways to look at it.
That's a good point.
There are a couple of ways to look at this, right? And so if there are certain things in it that are very close, let's say parodies of the animated series in terms of how things were filmed, when they do those funny close-ups of their face and their eyebrow going up or whatever, and they're definitely emulating that style of action, of voice, and of shots.
Right.
And so one of the other things about the animated series was there was a lot of inconsistent stuff that was contradictory. And so, yes, at the beginning of Next Generation, they do call him Bill at least once. Somebody calls him Bill Riker.
So you know what? I got to take that back. I guess I see your point, because when I saw Casper Kelly, who ran this thing at Comic-Con, he talked about how they, when they were this is more of the animation, but how much work the animators were put into making it look flawed.
Which they did. Like, the one thing I like about these is the animation style. I think it's great and it's funny, and I've watched a lot of the animated series, particularly because I was the copy editor on that book about the animated series. I do like that they've really, if you know the animated series, you can see it as a tribute. But the question is, like, it doesn't feel like it's for Star Trek fans. But if it isn't, then those people aren't going to get it anyway. So I'm so confused again by where it sits. Like, I'm just not sure what it is. And even things like they say, oh, you have warp drive, now you can join the Federation. Well, any Star Trek fan is like, what? You don't join the Federation because you have warp drive. And someone who isn't a fan doesn't know. I don't know. It's so, and then it just gets into this booger joke, which the idea of, I actually think they could have done that same joke, the bigger idea, which is that they go to meet these new people, they're so excited, and the people are super gross, could have been done in a very funny way, and to me was not done. I didn't laugh at all.
Well, I laughed at moments, because it wasn't just the gross thing. It's like their national dish is microwaved old fish. They were the most annoying people in the world. And you're like, well, maybe we don't want to do first contact with these people. It's a weird Venn diagram. I think it's casual Star Trek fans who are also big Adult Swim comedy fans. And I'm kind of adjacent to that because I'm not a casual fan, but I'm liking them enough. I'm still looking forward to next week, which is Aaron's.
I'm only looking forward to Aaron's. I'm just very confused by these. The only thing that I thought it was, a funny idea that Riker shoots their warp drive and destroys it so that they can't, they don't have to deal with them anymore. But I just want it to be funnier. I was like, if it was funny, then none of those things would bug me. Nothing would bug me. And I would just be laughing because it was so silly and funny. But even the jokes, like the microwave fish joke, it's like they didn't even make a joke about it. They just said it.
Well, humor is subjective. So, you say it's not funny. To some people, it is.
I know. I was just listening to Jimmy Kimmel talking on a podcast about how he said, some comedians, I don't think they're funny, but I do a monologue. Everybody laughs. Then a comedian that I don't think is funny comes out, and the same people are laughing at that guy. So who am I to say he's not funny? They think I'm funny. They think he's funny. It's like, right.
Anyway, speaking of something that is objectively funny, we can declare it's funny, and it's a fact that it's funny. Let's talk about the 4th episode of Lower Deck Season 4.
Because we get to go to Orion.
Oh, yeah. I mean, among so many things, the episode is called
Something Borrowed, Something Green. Because there's a wedding. Do you think this is they said there was going to be a wedding. This is the wedding.
This is the wedding. But this isn't the romantic episode because we know that's coming up later, the kind of Valentine's Day episode, which Mike described. Because we've seen clips of that from Ferenginar when.
Right.
So I think that's a whole different thing. So my theory that they were going to marry Shax and T'Ana for, that's out the window. Showing that I am not watching ahead because I am an idiot and guessing totally wrong.
No, it's good to guess. Doesn't make you an idiot.
Fair. Thank you very much. This one is written by not a new writer, Grace Para Janney. She's been an actress and a writer. She works with Mike on his other show. I think this episode had to be written by a woman. I don't know. Is that sexist for me to say?
Yes, I believe it is.
Okay, but I don't know. It benefited from being written by a woman. What do you think? Because it was it was a girls' trip. That's what Mariner calls it, and it was to a matriarchal society. All the main characters on Orion were women.
I thought that was a direct, trying to reverse the history of Orion's slave girls. I liked that. It was such a nice change from how we used to always, whenever we saw Orions until Discovery, it was always just hot women.
Right. I mean, well, obviously Enterprise, which they reference in this, Enterprise still did the hot women, but they revealed that the hot women were in charge, but they were still hot. And what did Mariner call them? Showgirls. How showgirls took over the ship.
Right.
But at least there were a number of things introduced in this episode that I felt were nods to Enterprise, like how people put the metal in their heads and all that which was introduced, and the tattoos and stuff like that. But I think, what I like, I guess we're just diving in it. So at a high level, I enjoyed the episode, mostly the A story. This is very much a big A story and then a kind of minor B story on the ship, which was fine, right? It was silly and fine, but that, I'm glad it was a B story. Let me put it that way.
Well, I'm glad it got less time because it deserved it. I also love this one. I thought they had not put those groups together before. It was really fun to have T'Lyn, Mariner, and Tendi off doing something together. And then Rutherford and Boimler don't usually spend a lot of time together, just the two of them. So that was really fun too. I thought it was about something. I thought it was funny. I thought it was fast paced and kept everything moving. And in terms of the big overarching season story, it was the first, they're starting to move closer, right? All of a sudden we now have them tied together. One of the Orion ship Orion ship got destroyed.
Yes.
And then Freeman says to Tendi, we're the Federation's trying to, we want to send you back there because we feel bad basically about that it was blown up.
Well, no, actually she said there's a missing ship. So, and they have no idea that it's part of a pattern of missing ships. So I wouldn't say tied. It was basically hinted at. The larger story, this was the first hint of it, which again, we like because it's the slow burn. But the visit to the Orion ship was fun. They were lower deckers, essentially. This was very much like Wedge Douche, right?
Right.
So you got a trio of lower deckers talking about working their way up to the syndicate. And I love how they were going through all the loot and they threw a TOS phaser in the garbage pile.
Right.
And then they end up getting, well, it looks like they're being killed, although we've got our theory that they're being transported. But
they were plunder sorters. That's what the lower deckers were.
Exactly. Yeah, they were not very, what did they call themselves? Like pirate adjacent or something like that.
Yes, pirate adjacent.
I mean, this episode had a lot, because it was trying to, again, confront the Orion pirate mythology and give us something deeper about their society. And it was very open about that when, at the beginning, when Mariner learns about the sister's wedding, she's like, oh, no one really knows about Orions. Of course I want to go. But what's interesting is how Tendi didn't want to go. She's totally distanced herself.
Right. She doesn't even go home for vacations.
But she was kind of ordered by the captain to,
yes.
which is where we get that connection to kind of smooth things over. I don't know how that smooths things over, but
well, because it's a powerful family, and they wanted their daughter to have leave. Like, she gave her leave so that she could go.
Right. I mean, we've heard this phrase, Mistress of the Winter Constellations, from like season 2 or something. Now we kind of get a sense of what that really means. She is like a princess, and her mother is a queen. Her
dad is named Bert.
Not Bert. It's Bert. I'm not sure how it spells, but I think there's like 2 or 3 U's in there.
Probably. Oh, okay.
Probably an apostrophe or something in there.
I just thought it was like, this is my mother, warrior queen Shona, and Bert.
Yeah. But I mean, that again shows you how the men in that society they're second-class citizens, essentially, or they're the real slaves. And certainly when we get to the sex dungeon, you can really see how they treat the men.
Well, because that's the sex dungeon.
Yeah. Which there are apparently many of. This is a typical sex dungeon.
There's like another one. Oh, right, exactly. Using their pheromones.
Moans, man.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on the moans. Yeah. Yeah, everything about they both tied into what we've known about Orions, but they really, I mean, this episode, it created a ton of canon for Orion.
Yeah.
But it was all funny.
Well, that they like to be carried around.
And I like how they kind of showed, the diversity of Orion society, notably how and this is because in Star Trek, the makeup on Orions would change over the different shows. So what they're saying is, which is great, is because people are always like, the Orions look wrong, in this show or that show.
Yeah, to me, their coloring on Discovery is always weird. It always looks off to me for some reason. And I thought in that opening scene, with the lower decker ones, the dude was the guy who looked like who had the disco color. Right.
Which is which is like humanity. They're saying there's nothing wrong. Every show that has done a green Orion in a different way, they're all right.
They're all correct. Yeah.
Yeah. There's many, many shades of green on Orion, which is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't what you would think of, with all the pirate talk and all that. The family lived in a palatial mansion, which is, as Barry said to us, it's like pirates when they go home, they live in a nice house, just like a drug lord or a crime lord, like Tony Montana.
That's why you do all that pillaging.
Exactly.
So that you can live in a nice house. And it was quite the house. Even in a post-scarcity world, as Mariner said, she was impressed.
Yeah. I mean, Mariner and again, T'Lyn, kind of like in the previous episode, was really good at being the outsider looking in and making the commentary. And she really, just like she did with Boimler at the end, really helped Tendi get through her little character arc. Say, you are who you are. And she described it as a good friend, which shows T'Lyn herself accepts Tendi as a friend, which is a big deal.
And she's changing because she gave up her whole report because she's a good friend. She
threw it out the window.
Yep. Yep.
and said, "Oh, I lost it." Yeah,
Right.
that was very later Spock in a way.
Yeah.
Movie era Spock of her. All of that.
Yeah. I like this trio very much.
Yeah, their journey across Orion, where no matter where they go, Mariner gets
stabbed in the same spot. That's just such a funny, stupid running joke.
Yeah.
But again, quick, good use of a running joke. Fast. Funny, fast, happens again, boom, done.
Yeah, they all of them were great. It's amazing that, they're all recording in closets or wherever, on their own, because there's so much, you just really feel this great chemistry. I don't know, maybe there was some for this season, but I'm not sure there was a lot of in-person.
Well, I hope that Jack and Eugene got to do some of their stuff together, because they would have fed off each other for sure.
Yeah, so let's switch quickly. I mean, certainly they're dueling twains and stuff, because the timing of that was so important. That would be really hard to edit that together.
Yeah,
because of how that patter went back and forth so perfectly. That story, I mean, one thing I liked about it is it didn't go where I thought it was going to go, because you thought it was going to be like a Jake and Nog situation where, when they became roommates and it was a total disaster. They got into this fight, and you thought the fight was going to escalate, but it quickly turned into this weird thing of how they could resolve their differences by both being Mark Twain, which is the most random thing.
I love it. Well, and it starts again with conflict, because they weren't both supposed to be Mark Twain. Each one thought they were going to be the only one. But what they learned from it is that they get along when they're identical.
Right.
And then they try to impart this lesson to their captain. So I thought it was
not smart at all. I don't know.
It was a weird thing to try, for sure. But that is what helped them with their bonsai, which is what they were fighting about.
Which they considered a child. They gave it a name, Little Boney.
Little Boney. But the whole idea that is how you could stop fighting, is being identical. It's a good twist on putting yourself in someone else's shoes, because it's just putting both of you in the same shoes.
Although there was an important note at the end when they're kind of recalling their days together. Tendi asked Boimler, well, you resolved your differences by being open and honest with each other. And they're like, oh, yeah, I guess we could try that. Because that's what worked for, in every episode. The breakthrough moment is when the character reveals their inner truth, right? We had that here with Tendi and her sister, and Boimler and Rutherford just skipped that step, and they went to dueling Mozarts.
Yep. Which was even more annoying than the dueling twins.
Well, the dueling twins was hilarious. The dueling Mozart was annoying, but funny annoying.
Yeah, I mean,
yeah,
that is what I mean.
But
the dueling twins had more of I thought, a Foghorn Leghorn vibe. More of that than a
say.
Yeah, it was very Foghorn Leghorn / Colonel Sanders or something. I don't know.
I thought Dawn Lewis did a pretty, when she came in and tried to do, they're like, you got to do the accent. And so she tried to do it, and she was doing it pretty well. But of course, the captain, the Chalnoff, which is a total deep cut, which I didn't even recognize.
I did, because it's an episode that I love.
But that captain was having none of it, even though when they said use a Southern accent, he's like, I am from the South.
From the South, yes. But he was great. I recognized him immediately and was thrilled to see him. And he was very irrational. And then he ate the bonsai. And then he got misted.
He drank the mist.
Yes.
So it worked out, even though they lost Little Boney. My favorite line of that is just a little thing at the end. I mean, that's the thing, how dense the show is when they have, so as they're just like walking away, and Captain Freeman says, you were very intimidating. He goes, oh, thank you. So, because I guess to a Chalnoff, that's pretty important.
Yeah.
Being intimidating.
Yeah.
And this was all, and there's another meta thing here. The whole argument between the captains was who gets to scan the nebula, which Tendi's sister kind of mentioned. She's like, what's with Starfleet and all the scanning?
Why isn't Starfleet obsessed with scanning? And Tendi's like, we like science.
But it's true. There's a lot of scanning in Star Trek.
Well, sure, because you need because the whole idea is that you need information to make a decision. Which is a revolutionary idea in 2023.
But still, the show isn't, it's not making fun of, but it's kind of pointing out, because when you when you compare it to Foundation or Star Wars, everything else, there's just not that much scanning going on. They just get extra scanning. That's all I'm saying.
There was something about at the very beginning of the episode where Tendi says that she's finished cataloging all the diseases blocked by the transporter after last week's shore leave. And I thought, this to me is a perfect summary of what is so great about this show and what makes it special and what makes it work. Like, it's packed because there was a lot of information in that sentence. It's funny. It's specific. It is believable. It raises questions about Star Trek and how it works, like the idea that you'd have to catalog all the diseases that come in after a shore leave. It is encapsulated to me the spirit of the show.
Absolutely.
And the murder bug drinking game was great.
Yes, and how Tendi, we learned so much about Tendi. She's a princess. She was trained to be an assassin.
Well, she's the prime. She's not a princess. She's the prime daughter.
If her mother's a queen, she's kind of like a princess, whatever. But she's trained to be an assassin, but she dreamed. I love the little drawing when she was a child of her and her sister, and she's like dreaming of being in Starfleet with her sister waving the sword around, showing that she was destined to scan. She doesn't want to do all this stuff. She wants to scan things.
But she's also really good at it. Like when she wins the weird Death Beetle game, she goes, "It's my first time." Like, I mean, we've seen her do amazing stuff before. In the Deep Space Nine episode, we saw her really kick into Orion gear. But I loved all of this stuff. She's so funny in that she does, and that she'd rather be like a nerd than a hot assassin.
Right.
Excellent.
And she showed that, when she defeated the mistress in charge of the sex dungeon. That was funny because the Enterprise episode introduced the pheromone thing, which then Tendi kind of tried to dismiss. But then this brought back and said, well, no, it's true. It's just that Tendi herself doesn't use the pheromones to control men, or maybe she can't, I guess. But many Orion women do, including this evil sex dungeon woman. But Tendi defeated her because she created a cocktail with her hypospray that could cure the
counteract. Yeah.
So I love when she cures the first one. He goes, oh man, not another, what did he call it? A pheromone room or something like that.
Yeah. Pheromone sex dungeon or something like that.
It's again, this is the great thing about this is that too often in Star Trek, cultures are monolithic. And this showed, Orion society, yes, there's pirates and they certainly have a lot of fun with that and the crime stuff. But it's a complicated society that we saw, and a diverse society. That shows how a lot of these guys could have been next gen writers, or, they could write for Discovery or Strange New Worlds easily, and creating new Star Trek canon, which they're doing. I mean, this is canon.
But I like the way they play with the old canon at the same time. Like even Tendi just saying like, I have to be photographed in our belly dancer outfits. Like, all that kind of stuff that says, yes, we know you've seen it and it looked like this. And by the way, here's a lot more information to flesh it out.
Yeah, they didn't say everything we know about Orions is wrong. In fact, they said a lot of it is right. It's just they added all this kind of fun context to it, I felt. But they got the details right, the Orion writing and stuff like that. And there was some good guest stars. I thought Ariel Winter from Modern Family played the sister, and Kimiko Glenn played the kind of mean girl.
The one with the death beetle? Or the one in the dungeon? The
one in the bar.
Yeah.
The first one who threw a knife at Mariner. Good guest performances. Nolan North is always great. He played the captain, the alien captain. Although it's a little one note because it was very similar to the Hunter from the Most Dangerous Game.
Sure.
Almost kind of felt like the same character in some ways, but still funny, I thought.
Yeah, agreed.
We learned a lot about. Mariner was just kind of along for the ride, but Tendi grew T'Lyn grew in a way. Boimler and Rutherford grew, or now they're called Rutherford. Which I guess is spelled BRU, right?
But it's disturbing their friends who think they've just gotten too close.
Yes. Well, we've all seen that when people start living together and they just get a little too, too
Alike.
much. Yeah.
Start dressing in identical costumes. I did enjoy, Boimler got one really good, bizarre line in this week that made me laugh, where he said that Grandmama Boimler always says a cool duvet keeps the raisin rats away.
Yeah, he called back on his, even though he really wanted to get away from the vineyard, which of course was a raisin vineyard, not a wine vineyard. He used that argument that he grew up on a vineyard as to why he should spray
mist
on Little Boney. Although the solution was kind of obvious, the even days and the odd days. I don't know why they needed the dueling Mark Twains to come up with that compromise.
They did, but they did. It was for that reason, because they had to be identical.
Yes. And what was the other argument was over, should they do...
It was their watercolor or an oil painting.
Yeah, of the Enterprise D, and the compromise was an acrylic.
Right.
They're Mozarting.
But I love the scene at the end where everybody kind of gathered together and sort of talked about their adventures.
Right. And what showed the wedding photos from the cool pirate wedding, which Boimler was very, as he would be, of course, jealous of not being able to go to the cool pirate wedding.
Right.
This is, it's a good, solid one-off. I don't see much coming from this related to upcoming episodes per se. But that's what's great about the show. It's episodic. This was the Orion episode. We learned a lot, and these characters have, continue to grow into be. I mean, the whole point at the start of this was they had free time because they're lieutenants now, and they have more time on their hands. So they continue to play up the implications of the promotions. Well,
even though T'Lyn says that celebrating a lack of purpose is illogical.
No,
I disagree. I think you should celebrate a lack of purpose when you have one.
Yes, well, obviously that's not how they do things on Vulcan.
No. I mean, I think that's it. I really enjoyed this one. These episodes are so fun. I feel like they're rooted in some real stuff, like how you deal with when you move away from your family and you're afraid to have your friends find out things about your background. All that stuff is very real, even if we can't all be Orion pirates.
Yeah, with the constant theme of honesty is the best policy. When you speak your truth, then you become your best self. Because that was the whole thing about both the sister and Tendi herself, was accepting that she is where she wants to be. Because she described her Orion background as her real self. And they're like, no, your real self is on the Cerritos.
Yeah, her real self is all of it. Her real self is all of those elements.
Yeah, she can kick ass and be a cool scientist nerd at the same time.
Exactly.
So that's it. Season 4, fantastic.
Agreed.
It's really going well. I think fans are going to like this. I don't think it's going to be polarizing in any way.
No, I don't think it. I mean, there's some people who just don't like it and think it's a dumb show, but I'm not one of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I meant, within the people who've already liking the show, I think.
Yeah, there's nothing polarizing about it. It's super fun.
So let's do some bits of the week and wrap things up.
Well, I'll start with the fact that scientists in Brazil, this was an article that was in the New York Times, have identified 3 new species of spiders, and they've named them Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. They're part of the Roddenberryus genus. That's the taxonomy. And they said they chose it because Gene Roddenberry inspired generations of kids to pursue scientific careers, which is true. And that they also thought that the spiders looked a little bit like Star Trek ships. But Kirk, Spock, and McCoy belong to a family of spiders, unique for having only 2 eyes instead of the more common 8, and rows of teeth, bristles, orange carapaces, pale abdomens, and claws. And apparently there's also a bunch of spiders named after David Bowie. This is a common fun thing to do for scientists. But the New York Times article had pictures of each of these spiders so you could actually see them. I'm not a fan of spiders, but I do like that they're named Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. And
obviously some Tendi-like scientists in Brazil are out there excited about scanning for spiders.
Yes.
And it's great that we're still finding new life. Apparently there's millions of species still to be discovered, especially in the Amazon rainforest.
Even if it's spider life, which is sort of terrifying, at least to me. So what have you got?
Well, actually, in a way, you may end up talking about this more because you brought it to my attention, but it's this great Twitter thread from David Mack, who's one of the most prolific and popular writers of Star Trek fiction. And he just wrote this long thread about the book he's working on, which is coming out next year, called Firewall, which is a Picard book about Seven. But apparently the USS Dauntless plays a major role in it. And he kind of talks through his research process. The Dauntless was seen on Prodigy a lot, and how he kind of figures out what we know about the ship, and then kind of how he realizes how there's things he needs to fix, like how there was no sick bay on the diagrams and stuff. So it's interesting how he tries to stick to the canon, but knows where he needs to create new canon, even though the books are not canon. So it's a really interesting thread for people who are curious about the writing process and using Star Trek research, using Memory Alpha, because everyone uses it. We use it. Even people who create Star Trek use Memory Alpha.
Of course, the movies, they used it. Everybody uses it. Yeah, this was such a great thread. I thought just understanding the serious process that has to be done, because he does take it all really seriously and has to look at the information that exists and then extrapolate from what's not there.
Yeah. So I guess that's it for the week. Next week, we hit our halfway point for the season of Lower Decks.
It's crazy.
So see you for our final episode of September.
See you next week.